Awesome. Thank you, Laurel, and welcome everybody. What we'll do today is hopefully a little different than a standard webinar. So instead of me clicking through an hour worth of slides, I figured I'd invite people who are as passionate about this topic as I am and have them share a lot of the experiences and a lot of the stuff that I've worked with them on, with some of them, I suppose. And so what I'll do is I'll briefly introduce everybody in a little more detail so you'd understand who's on the line. And then I'll just kind of set stage and introduce kind of some of the ideas that I've started having around traceability. And then we'll actually have Eric and Carlos present kind of some real world scenarios, and Carmen and Slater talk about their experiences as well. So I'm just gonna get started and get going. So just so you know who's on the line, so I'm Mara, I'm a value chain marketer at Tasktop. I actually played a couple different roles. I started on the product management side, which is where I first noticed and realized the kind of complexities of software development, even with Agile, and especially the elegant complexities of traceability, and needing to know when things are done and what release things are in, and realizing that it's not that simple. Which leads me, since then I've moved to the dark side of the world, to the sales side, and work with customers more. But that leads to David Slater, who was my initial victim of these questions. So he was the guy who I always pinged and asked where things are and when things were delivered. He's our operations manager here at Tasktop, but since that time, he's also moved on to do a whole bunch of other stuff with Tasktop, moving to SaaS, and he's also has some experience with compliance traceability, so he's going to talk about that. Next up is Carmen Diardo. I hope Carmen doesn't need an introduction. If you don't know Carmen, I'd suggest Googling him. He has a wealth of knowledge and he loves sharing it, and I spent the last 2 years trying to learn as much from him, and he essentially advises all of our customers on improving flow. Next up is Carlos. Carlos is, I think, on top of us knowing each other since we were 8 and growing up and going to the same high school. We happen to also be in the same industry now, and we usually have our summer or winter project when I see him on building out some cool stuff, so we'll see some of that. And then last is Eric, who I've known for a few years now. I couldn't pinpoint the time that I actually got to know you, Eric, but similar situation. As every time we've been on a call, we've happened to talk about just various traceability aspects and things like that. So we'll see some cool stuff from him as well. Just to set the stage of how I think about traceability, because it's probably the world's most complex word with the most definitions, I think I would like everybody to kind of challenge everybody to, rather than try to find one definition of traceability, just kind of think about different angles that you can take when talking about traceability. So you can think about types of traceability, and we'll actually see each of these today in our conversations. We'll, compliance, pretty self-explanatory, self-service. This is the traceability that I was struggling with when I was on the product side. And then change management. And so those are kind of 3 main types that I've noticed. Or you can think about consumer personas, right? Who is the consumer of the traceability? And this is what Eric is going to talk about a lot. Is going to touch on is like, is it the executive? Is it the team member? Is it the engineer? Like understanding who is the consumer, I think, is as important. But for the sake of making it simple, I think let's just think about traceability as the ability to trace work items across the development lifecycle, be able to keep track of what's going on, and then show what's happened after the fact. And I think with those couple points in mind, we're just gonna dive right in, and I'm gonna start by passing to Eric, and Eric is gonna share some of the experiences that him and I have worked through, and actually he's doing in his organization. So Eric, I'm just gonna pass to you so we have the most time.
Thanks, Mara. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name's Eric. I work at the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta in the RPO, which is the Retail Payments Office. A lot of you would know what we do. We're responsible for transmitting money from one bank to another, and you'd probably recognize when your paycheck gets deposited into your bank automatically. That comes through our systems. So a little bit about me. I started off as a developer back in the 90s, working in C and C++. Towards the late 90s, I transitioned over to Java, and then around the turn of the century, started doing J2EE development and some software software design. Around the mid-aughts, I started working with our build engineers, and a lot of the time we were trying to troubleshoot the integration heap where everybody was checking their code in, and it was one big jumbled mess. And because I had a lot of working knowledge with the software, and because I like working with people, I started working with our build engineers very closely and eventually started to become a part of that team. This is about the time we started automation and doing our nightly builds and running nightly test cases, and that led to traceability starting to become a primary part of my job description. Because as soon as people started seeing these reports when they came in the next morning, they started asking more questions about what else can we put into these reports? How do we know where something is coming from, where it is going, and when it's going to get there? So that led to a focus on processes and automation. And so traceability has a big overlap with very strong processes, which we'll get to in a little bit, as well as the ability to automate the communication of this information around your systems. As most of you know, there's a lot to do with dependency management. What we tend to find is that people come to you and they ask a very simple question, but the answer is often much more complex and has a lot to do with how those work items interact with other areas. The ultimate goal is to make this as simple as possible for our end users, which is, in our case, the development staff. So the developers, the testers, our business analysts, our project managers, and other people who play a role in all of our software development. What we want to do is produce a self-service environment where they can perform their own traceability analysis and get to the heart of the work that they're working on. So that brings us to the next slide about our users. So context is extremely important. It really depends who's asking me when a specific item is going to be delivered. When a developer is asking, they're really asking what's the deadline for them to check in their code. When a tester is asking, they want to know when they'll be able to start doing the testing in one of the test environments. And one of our business analysts or project managers asks, they're most likely looking at when are things going into production. The problem is, this is almost always nuanced. Even though an individual work stream can start from idea, go through some refinement, get worked on, and ultimately delivered, they never really work independently. And oftentimes we bundle a bunch of stuff together and need to be able to trace both horizontally and vertically through the system. We need to be able to understand from beginning to end along the work item where it's at, as well as how it's performing and evolving with the other work items in a given bundle. So as you see, our answers to this are almost always nuanced. So what our users really need to do is focus on the work they're doing. A lot of effort is spent trying to go back and figure out the context around the answers that they're getting. When they're given data, they want to understand exactly where they need to go and what they need to do next. What you want to try and do is get people to work naturally, not as robots assigned to a tool. So that means a lot of your process focus needs to be around how do the work items progress, and then turn around and try and configure and administer your tools in such a way that it fosters a very natural evolution of the work items through the system. To be able to do this, you really have to understand everything from soup to nuts. You have to understand the context. You have to be able to understand all the different people who are involved in the work effort and how they come together. So thread work is very important, but thread works have dependencies, right? That's kind of the gist of everything that I'm talking about here. I gave you a couple of little screwy pictures that I was mentally playing with, and they're at the bottom of the screen there. All right, well, let's get into what we did with Tasktop. Next slide. So we used Jira as a workflow engine here in my department. And we have other members on our team that do a lot of their testing in ALM. What we wanted to do was to keep developers out of ALM to search for answers on test development, and keep testers out of JIRA to see where development had progressed. And our first foray into solving this particular traceability problem was to look for a plugin in JIRA to communicate data between ALM and JIRA. We ended up working with Tasktop and finding out that we had quite a bit of flexibility with how we were able to keep data synchronized between the two tools. So our users at any given time are able to see what unrelated users are doing because the statuses between the two tools move back and forth. We're also able to replicate comments and questions so that users can actually talk to each other and build up information along the thread of an individual defect. I think you got to click one more time to get the security stuff to pop in. Yeah, there we go. Awesome. A couple years ago, we decided that we were going to start running some security scans and introduce defects in JIRA as well from any of the findings that we had. And as a result, we implemented the gateway solution and have another product talking to Tasktop through the gateway. And that allows us to put additional defects into the system around our security findings. And what we end up having is a package where we can see how we're doing with respect to our security, the stability of the code, as well as the defects, functional and non-functional, that are identified in an ALM and then replicated into JIRA. And as any of you who use JIRA know, you can use those and bundle them all together as a release. And this is the bundle of work items that we predominantly track. The majority of our traceability is done inside of JIRA because we link our issues. All those issues are tied together with dates. We have various JIRA projects that manage our defects as well as our deployments so that we see the progression of these packages through our systems. Currently in development, we are adding in requirements coming out of our Micro Focus ALM, and those are going to become epics and stories within JIRA. So now we have great traceability from the original requirements and how they get implemented in code, then deployed, be able to test that deployment and generate defects to help refine the code. And the users in JIRA can trace the evolution of this work item from inception all the way to deployment and watch each of the iterations as we go through the various deployment environments on its way into production. Right now, in our development environment, we are also adding in additional metrics that we're using. And I think you can move on to the next slide here. So as we start to pull in all of our requirements, our bugs, and our test results into JIRA, which is our main workflow engine, we are also adding in our source code and doing automated builds through Jenkins. Now, the automated builds were something that we've been doing for quite some time, but because of the Tasktop Enterprise data stream, we're able to capture metrics from when those builds occur, how long various JIRA issues are in given states so that we can measure how it is that things are progressing through the system. And now we have the ability to show users not just how an individual work item is actually worked on, but how it is represented throughout all of the work items that are contained within a release. And those releases can actually be compared to each other, and we can see the coordinated effort of multiple development teams all targeting the same environment. We've also started to tie this into our change management systems so that we can get an accurate picture of when our maintenance of various systems are going on, our proposed patching, various tests that we perform on our systems so that areas of deployment are blocked out. And we can actually see all of the work effort at any given time and give it to the user in a way that they can click through and understand how everything relates to each other. Ultimately, for managers in particular, but quite a bit for project managers as well, reports are generated from our metrics database, which allows them to grab a snapshot into what is going on at any given time. All right, so let's talk about what we should do. I think it's very important that you start with your process. A good process is going to be what you can use to appropriately configure your tools to support that. I like to refer to this as the minimal effective dose. If you use too much process, what tends to happen is your users figure out how to work around it. They'll find the weakest link and use that so that they can subvert the process, because nobody likes to introduce more work, even if it does produce good results. So if you keep your process at the minimal effective dose, what you end up having is a very natural workflow for your users. It's very important to have champions, people who work together and further this. I've been very lucky in the companies that I've worked for. Usually upper management is very excited to see this type of development. And so there's a lot of upper management support as well as grassroots support. And I find, it's not in the slide, but I find that if you can be really awesome to your coworkers, they tend to like to work with you and collaborate. And that collaborative effort can really further the amount of work that you get done. Plus, it also helps you understand things from their perspective, which is important as you're trying to get the right balance of process and tool configuration. I like to use pictures. Be sure you document everything. Make sure that everybody understands and is able to communicate effectively. Somebody is going to have to know everything, and you're going to need some champion who goes through and is able to understand from beginning to end, horizontally and vertically, how everything works, so that they can become the grease and the glue that put this, but not least, probably the most important, is have a stand-ins. Configuring your tools, you definitely want to start small, right? If you've got a well-defined process, in our case, it was defects to bugs. I mean, they're almost identical, and the two tools treat them very similarly. It was very easy for us to put those two together and build out from there. Again, processes are extremely important. Your best bet is to try and connect everything. It's much better to over-connect and have the information handy than it is to exclude things for the sake of simplicity. Doesn't mean you have to show it to your users. Connecting and understanding is important for the champion as they document and figure everything out. Automation is completely key. Everything that's automated, the more the systems can do for you and take the mundane tasks out of computer development, the better off everything's going to be. And finally, focus on self-service. You want your users to be able to get in and get to the information that they want without having to go to people who are the experts. You want them to be able to automatically grab the information and go from there. And of course, your scope's going to change, and you need to be comfortable with that. All right, Mara, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you. I'm good. So I'm just going to pass, now we're going to pass to Carlos. Carlos is going to, I think, spin this from a little bit of a different angle, but I think the interesting thing is going to be that at the core, it's the same concepts, it's the same ideas, and I think that it's just, like I said, try to understand your consumer, and I think that can help understand kind of how to get started and where to go. But I think, yeah, we'll just pass to Carlos and see what they've done.
All right, thanks, Mara. Thanks, Eric. That was really cool and really relates very well to what I'm about to say. So yeah, I'm the CTO at AA Projects. We're a company that focuses on custom development, and we do a lot of consulting, and mainly it's within the government world. Our clients, for the most part, are government institutions and so on. So we have to sort of navigate this this frame where we have this sort of waterfall outer frame, and then within that we try to be as agile as we possibly can. There's some more stuff on me, but I'm not going to go through that. You can read that on my LinkedIn if you're really up to it. But yeah, what I wanted to show you here is really that the constraints that we see a lot with our clients is that within the sort of bigger scale, bigger picture, we see that there's still a lot of this sort of project approach that has these constraints initially. They're set initially, say you have 3 years to do these things, set of goals, and you have this amount of money, and that's what it is, and it's been for a while. It's the reality, but within that, we actually think we've been very successful with trying to get that in between bit as agile as possible. Use Scrum and Safe and DevOps methods and so on, to really get the right thing built and see if that works. And yeah, so for me, traceability is I have a bunch of things here, so I'll go through this. So let's say we look at a story, an artifact, an item, a work item. First thing, to me, the traceability is about the history of this item, all its versions from the creation of it throughout the history, because that's really important, because that gives us the ability to see how this item has progressed, the trends, and so on. Another way to look at traceability is how this story relates to other stories. It might be in the same sprint. It might be a part of a bunch of stories that explain the same feature. So there's a bit of traceability there. Of course, a story usually comes from somewhere. There could be a requirement, a high-level goal, or a feature, or a bet, or whatever the fancy word now is for that. An idea, basically, that we need something. In our field of work, we're very diligent about meeting minutes. We try to keep those in check from all sorts of meetings, status meetings, work groups, any stakeholder meetings, and we really try to have those in a structured manner within our tools and actually relate them to user stories. So if there's a discussion later on, we can quickly access those. Testing, obviously, can't do without it. And then we actually have our developers, once they commit code, we have that relate that code to some story or a defect that they've been working on, and so on. So we have that traceability there as well. Once the code is committed, we want to build something, we want to build that code. So this story will be, it will be associated within, a build artifact, a deployment. It could be a test environment, it could be, pre-production, production, and so on, and finally, software version release. And yeah, once it's deployed somewhere, you can do some testing. Some bugs gonna show up. You'll do more of that sort of stuff. So stories will really could relate to a lot of commits, quite a few artifacts, quite a few deployments to different environments, and so on. So a bunch more bugs show up, which hopefully doesn't happen that often. But yeah, so and then somebody shows up and maybe associates a risk item to your story, which always confuses me a little bit, unless it's like a workable risk item that you can really work with. Then maybe somebody shows up with a ticket from production, and actually that relates back to your story, and that could be a lot more things like tasks and problem statements or whatever that is. There's a whole thing of things happening around the story, as Eric said before as well. So for me, context and being able to access it all and having that story traced to these things is really key. So we can answer these sort of questions: where the story is coming from, why are we building it, what's the status of it, is it in production, is it accessible, and has it been tested? And to answer all these questions, you need to have all this surrounding information around it. So yeah, that's traceability. Before I actually demo something else, because I have a whole lot of things and I'm really excited. But yeah, a bit of history for us. When I started, it all looked somewhat like this. A customer had an idea, they had a bunch of specifications, a lot of documentation, and so on. They would contract an outsourced developer, send them over these specifications. They would do some programming. It would be nice if they use Jira, which for the most part everyone does. They would track their tasks and issues and lower level items there, and then maybe the customer would have keep track of some bugs as well, maybe submit some in their Jira. But to be honest, this is not agile. You cannot work in a have any agility in this way, because it's all error prone. It's all in Word documents, spreadsheets, and so on, and on some file server. To this day, SharePoint still, whenever I see SharePoint, I cringe a little. So because there's too many files in it, you can never find anything. But maybe different to other people. But yeah, so what we started looking at is having all that information in a very structured manner in some good tools, and we found JAMA. We've used Rally before and some other, but JAMA really excels at this, having all this information in neat little items and relate them. And to really, JAMA for us really serves as something that also Eric mentioned, that it's a single source of truth where any stakeholder can log in and see what's happening with their requirement, story, or whatever interests them, and really see, have that information to make decisions. It really works with as a tool where you can see live actual information, because it's all, what we'll do, we'll sync not just bugs with Jira, but also user stories that maybe were defined here in JAMA, and a lot of stuff across using Tasktop really. And that's when we find efficiency, speed, precision in this sort of environment where we have an outsourced developer. Without Tasktop, it's just impossible. You cannot talk about agile if you don't have something like this set up, because that's you need automation for that, and automation will be precise, fast, and quite efficient, and that's when you can start talking about some agility within this sort of framework. So what I'm going to actually show you, we'll have something in JAMA. I'll show you JAMA, a dashboard within JAMA from an actual project, a small one though, but it will suit our purposes today. We'll see how we'll talk about a single story, the story of a story, how it's traveling from JAMA to Azure DevOps, where a bunch of our developers work in, and we'll actually do some coding, create a commit. Once that commit is run, committed, then we'll build some software which runs through an automated pipeline. We'll have some tests, have some test results come back into JAMA, so all our stakeholders can access that and see that. We'll have some information from that run back into JAMA in regards to deployment, how that looks, where this thing is deployed, and where can I access it. And yeah, and obviously we need relationships again to have that traceability, to see where this story actually lives and what it relates to. So yeah, I'm going to pop over to JAMA. This is a neat little project that we did. I really liked it, and it only has 4 sprints, but we still sort of do some maintenance right now, and we're looking forward to doing some extra work on it. But yeah, so within this dashboard, as you saw previously in that little picture I sort of drew up there in that visualization, there's a lot of information in here. There's stories within sprints, there's some tasks up there, defects, and so on and so on. Meeting minutes down here, a burn down chart that I actually would love to talk about a little more. But what we're gonna first look at is a bunch of requirements here. I'm gonna look at those. We can see that they've, for the most part, most of them have been completed. Some are informative, some have been canceled along the way. And what this green bar really actually means is that there's a bunch of user stories beneath it, that really are the work items that get to implement that functionality described in the feature up there. So we're going to look at a certain user story number 66. So Number 66. Yeah, it's written in a very obscure language called Latvian, which I happen to know very well. But there's nothing fancy about it really. It's just the classic sort of structure for a user story: who, what, when, and a bunch of other stuff. But that's not that important right now. We're going to look at versions. Versions are the first bit of traceability that we look at. And what I wanted you to show you is this peculiar user called Azure Sync. That means that actually some information was created in Azure and got synced over to JAMA. And that means that the developers in Azure Sync actually changed the status from in development to delivered. So people on this side can probably start to do some testing. With that, I'm going to pop over to Azure DevOps. Oh, is it? So we have a nice neat Kanban board with some of the stuff we're doing right now, but we'll actually look for our story 66. I'll make it bigger a bit because it's so you can see that the story that had this ID in JAMA, number 66, it's still here. There's a developer assigned to it. Yeah, actually, you could make a comment here. For some reason, it sometimes doesn't want to open that chat box there. No, it's not going to open it. I'll try again. I just wanted to make a comment there so you can see it. No. Anyway, I wanted to make a comment so you can actually see that gets over to JAMA again, but that's not that important. So you'll see that this story has been integrated in quite a few builds and quite a few commits and so on. So yeah, what we're actually gonna do is do some coding. Go into our code repo. This is obviously not the best practice to do this sort of thing from here, master branch, but for the sake of today, we'll go fix some white space here and actually commit some code. So yeah, we saw things in JAMA, looked at the story in Azure DevOps, and now we're at this part here at the commit stage, and we're gonna run the pipeline to see if we can get some results over back into JAMA. So fix some white space again, because I did that this morning. So 398 was the story. We're gonna associate that. It's 66 in JAMA, 398 in Azure DevOps. We'll create that commit. And what happens right now is in our pipelines, we have this little pipeline here. It says we're on version 1.160. We have a job running here. So what this thing is actually going to go through, there's a bunch of things happening and not that important really, but there are two things happening here that I want to point out. There's one thing is through Tasktop we will send some information to JAMA in regards to the deployment information, and there's another task here that actually will send the test results from our Cypress tests over into JAMA. This is going to take about 3-4 minutes. We could work on speeding that up, but yeah.
I think that one of the things I want to mention, just from, sorry, Carlos, but just to make
go ahead.
kind of clear, or what I found, still to this day find really interesting, or why I enjoy setting up integrations with people, is that what Carlos was doing in Azure, there is nothing that the developer in their day-to-day have to change in their process, right? Or their steps, or what they do. Like the developers, Carlos actually knows what's happening behind the scenes with integrations because he set it up. But from like a developer perspective and their day-to-day perspective, it is not interrupted, right? They're just going about their day. They're writing code. The pipelines are set up and they're there to help them and build it and do the job that they're supposed to. And just using automation and integration and things like that is what will yield all that visibility back into JAMA, as an example. And what Eric was talking about, the same thing with different tool sets, but it's all that I think that's a core thing that a lot of times when you talk about the consumer persona of traceability, this is like, okay, the developer is uninterrupted, but the business gets the visibility that they need, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a very important thing to kind of note and realize, which a lot of times people are hesitant to embark on some of these journeys because it seems to potentially impose a lot of pain on the end users. But in this scenario, the goal is to not interrupt the developer, right? Not interrupt their day-to-day, and have the MEs, the product managers, stop bugging Slayer about all these questions and when things are going to be done, or if things are done. Like that's been a super interesting kind of exploration for me as I've worked with customers, is like, how do you help people not be interrupted in their day-to-day? I just wanted to note that before you move on.
Exactly. That's what have developers develop software, and then the results of that, you just have a self-service for all the other stakeholders, and you don't have to bother them with questions or anything. And that's the whole idea behind it, kind of keep everyone happy. Back to, I wanted to actually show a bit of Tasktop configuration here again, and there's one bit I really, we have our stories and defects flowing over from JAMA to Azure DevOps, and these couple of things from pipeline, the test results and the deployment info. But then there's one thing that's really, really neat, and Eric also talked about that, which is whenever something happens to an item within JAMA, a status changes, something else changes, we actually save that event into a nice, neat SQL database table. And we have that information in nice and structured fashion to really create some cool visualizations from that, which is actually, you can see it here on the dashboard. JAMA's dashboards are really, really pretty nice and neat and everything, but it's very hard to have something like this, like a burn down chart with actual live data on it, because you need to see the history. You don't just need to access what's the status right now. You need to see the history of the whole thing, and yeah, that's what Tasktop allows to do by saving these events. It's a simple thing, but it's very powerful. And yeah, so what we have is requirements here on the left. We give them t-shirt sizes, sum them up, and have a bunch of approximation about how much we have to do within these 4 sprints. And then when the sprint happens, in sprint 1 we completed 4 stories, and the sum of these story points is actually that burn down rate that we're seeing here. And after 1 or 2 or 3 sprints, we can actually see very nicely how are we progressing, and whether we're going to finish in time or when we can expect to be done. It's obviously an
magical
approximation.
Question.
Yeah. And then one thing that we just managed to create, which is really neat, is it shows not just only the accepted user stories within that sprint, but also the ones that were planned for that sprint but were actually canceled. And it's really available right in here. And in the 3rd sprint, we can actually see our story 66. And I'm pretty sure you could, click on it. Oh, it opens in a separate tab. Oh, never mind. Yeah, but yeah, our story is here. So that's really nice and neat, and really gives that ability for the people who need to make decisions, make informed decisions about whatever they need to make the decision. It's just available to them here, and that's very, 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 we find it very powerful. One other, I just love these burn down charts. This is from another project, which is which I wanted to look at. Is it actually shows we're at sprint 8 right now, and it actually shows in this purple, it shows what we've planned for sprint number 8. And if you see at the burn down rate, it looks like we're going to finish by sprint 10 or 11 maybe. But I'm really curious about why we have planned so little in sprint 8, because that looks a bit shallow, that purple bit there. And immediately once I saw this, I thought, maybe we need to plan some more, because it looks like we've been, gaining some momentum there, but then slowing down a bit here. So maybe we should find some more and look at that. And this really simple visualization lets us, you know, to gauge that really quickly. And yeah, yeah, I wanted to show that because I thought that's so exciting. I don't know, for me at least.
Your toys.
Yeah, we have this run through, and we should have our story 66. It's here, and in the relationships tab, we should have a bunch of interesting stuff here. So 1.160, that's the deployment information that we just received. You can see in the version history it was just received. Oh, it's 6:39 p.m. because I'm way over in Eastern Europe, in Latvia. So it's late for me. You can see that it came from Azure, and there's a you know, the version information where it's been deployed and a bunch of other stuff. And another neat thing in regards to the test results, we have this. JAMA is actually pretty good with trace matrices, and this is the one that I created just now. Where are my test results? Yeah, let's see, 66 to 102. Yeah, it's the last ones. I think it should have been a date there, today's date. We'll have a look at that test result if it actually completed. Yeah, it's today, and yeah, you can see it was just created just a few minutes ago. And for some reason,
just again, the interesting thing is that all of that is not happening in JAMA. Like, you know, all of that is spinning through your pipeline, and it's essentially driven by Azure. And I think that's kind of the core
available thing here. Yeah.
Is from looking from JAMA where things are sourced, being able to trace it all the way down to that level, I think is the core thing.
Yeah. Sorry. And going back to that story about a story, you know, it's all available here now. We can see all the history. We can see where it's been deployed to the version. We can see, you know, the latest automated test results. Yeah, there's something not quite coming through quite right, but yeah, we'll fix that later. but yeah, you get the idea. There should be a date there and time, but that's fine. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all of it. All I wanted to show. I hope that made sense. Yeah.
No, I think that those are the core. I think those are kind of the core things to just keep in mind, is that I think the way that I've helped Carlos work through some of this parts of the integration pieces is, you know, trying to understand what is it that you want to see, what is it that you want to see, who's going to see it, which tool you want to see it in, and then working backwards. And I think we've done a pretty good job kind of figuring out, you know, figuring it out a bit by bit, if you will. Okay, so what we're gonna do for the remaining 15 minutes or so is we're just gonna switch over to just kind of having a discussion with the folks that are here on the line, and feel free to jot some questions down in the chat box for those who are listening. But what I'll do is, and Carlos, you can stop sharing, I'll just kick off the conversation by asking a question or two, and then, you know, we can just see where the conversation goes. But I think one of the things that I wanted to start with is, Carmen, maybe you could join in the conversation, since you saw these two wonderful demos and two wonderful stories from Eric and Carlos. Is like, with your experience, I think there's two big questions that I have, since you come from a very massive organization before Tasktop. It's like, number one is, you know, how about scale? Like, how can a company with, you know, not 100 people, but at 10,000 people get somewhere here? Like, and, you know, how does this work at scale? And where do you start? Like, how would you suggest people to start from what you've seen work and not work? Or where should you not start, maybe? You know, what's a don't go there side?
Yeah, so I think we had two great examples here, and it's really about, you know, a couple concepts, right? First of all, things need to be visible. People need to know where things are so they can pull the data themselves rather than have to ask questions, have meetings, spend a lot of time like, where's my thing? What's going on here? And I think if you think about it, there's been a lot of focus on CI/CD, but think about kind of the end of the value streams, if you will. So if you think about incidents or things that happen in production, you want people to be able to work in their best of breed tools to do their jobs. So you have service managers and they're managing incidents and problems. And some of those are going to become defects that need to be addressed. So now you have a defect created in a quality management tool. So, maybe you started in ServiceNow Remedy, now you have a defect that's in an ALM, and you have a quality manager who's looking at that. And eventually that's going to find its way into an agile management tool like a Jira or an Azure DevOps for the developer to actually work, sort of as Eric and Carlos showed, to actually mitigate that issue. Now, the reality is there's one thing that happened, right? There was, let's say, an incident that needed a defect that needed a code fix to address, right? So maybe the incident was addressed, but there was an underlying code fix that needs to happen. There's only one source of the truth. There's only one incident. You don't want these three versions of the truth running around, because then what's really the facts here? If the incident gets closed, but you still have a defect, and the defect is in one state, but the actual developer is working on something that's in a different state, nobody knows what's going on. And people don't want to have to get into 3 or 4 or 5 different tools to figure out how this is going to work. So I think at scale, it's actually more important, because you really want to allow people to be in the tool that they want to work on and see the same information. So by having the traceability, the integration of an incident or a problem in ServiceNow with a defect in ALM, with a bug in Jira, you're seeing in real time what's happening. You're seeing the status, you're seeing the comments, and everybody now knows without having to ask a bunch of questions what's going on. And that's critical, I think, as we start to focus on how people in a large enterprise can work in their tool of choice and yet all see the same version of the truth at the same time, to be able to know what's happening. I think the other side of it is again having that horizontal flow that we showed, right? So sometimes work starts, in operate, right, in the operation phase, and then other types. So things like defects, typically can start either there, or they can start on the portfolio side, right? So you have new features. Well, again, you want to be able to see that flow from the portfolio tool, be it a Jira line or a plan view or whatever you're using. How does that flow into the backlog of your agile team, and then how does that further flow through the release process to deploy, as Carlos showed. And so having that visibility and being able to see that flow and having that all traced is invaluable, especially in a large enterprise where when you're moving to DevOps, you may have a lot of different tools. You want to be able to abstract that, right? You want to be able to sit on top of that and really focus on the artifact types, regardless of the tools that teams are using, to make sure you can see that flow, you can see that traceability, and then you are able to pass the things like the audits and other things that need to be passed, or the CAB meetings where you need to demonstrate, well, here's all the things that are in that release, and here's all the sign-offs that I got from testing. Because if you can't do that, you can't start to automate it. And if you can't automate things, right, then you're not going to get the speed and the velocity that you need to remain competitive.
Yeah, so I think it goes back.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Go, Eric.
I was just going to say, Carmen's absolutely right about how this goes from department to department. And in larger organizations, you bring up scale, there's tens of thousands of people who work at the Fed, and they all work differently. They use different tools. They have different processes. They use different programming languages. They have different purposes. And you don't just get change across from production down to requirements, but as you move across different organizational lines, you have to be able to speak totally different languages, because some people are waterfall, some people are Scrum Agile, some people are, you know, mainframe. There's all kinds of different development teams, and they have to work together. And the key, and Carmen brought this up, is to be able to abstract it. And the model within Tasktop has proven to be one of the most powerful tools I've been able to utilize in order to think, what is the truth? And then the collections allow me to translate that truth to an individual tool, and the integrations get that all flowing. It really, I love working with Tasktop because it fits in between the tools. Everything that I've had to struggle with, trying to go from group to group, tool to tool, process to process, Tasktop has inserted itself to help make that bridge. And it's been very powerful for our organization to let people focus. I'll let you take over now.
That's cool. No, that's totally cool. I actually wanted to flip the conversation a little bit, from speaking from scale, going to, I guess, different kinds of organizations, and pass a little bit, have Slater comment a little bit of what he's experienced, because interestingly, Tasktop recently has gone to a SaaS model too. So I think we as an organization have gone through a lot of change. So I wanted him to jump in and actually talk about how, you know, not only scale, but how also like different types of like how has that affected, I think, the whole world, his world of traceability.
Absolutely. I mean, we were a team that always had a very wide breadth of tools, like sort of what Eric was talking about really resonates, and same with Carmen with the operations. I mean, we were a team that has quite a bit of tools that we have to deal with, being you know, infrastructure engineers, but also involved in the build and release. So when we started operating SaaS products, that was just another explosion of tools that you have to have traceability in as well. So, you know, for example, this is things like security tooling, monitoring CVEs and all of that stuff. But it also creates a new, you know, edge of communication with a bunch of different teams that are putting things into these environments. So our role is sort of an infrastructure service provider. We provide the infrastructure that these and operate the infrastructure that these products run on with the teams. So having that traceability back to the work that has gone through and is being deployed is incredibly important, especially in something like an incident, as Carmen was talking about, to be able to efficiently deal with that. The whole other side of it is, you know, expanding compliance requirements over time for whatever compliance schemes that you're a part of. You know, these type of things, if you don't address them with automation and traceability, cause a huge amount of drag in sort of the form of toil for those teams, and can really slow you down and make you less effective to respond. For a team like this, you know, our infrastructure is code. We operate much like a normal software development team. So, you know, keeping that agility is really important, but we also have to be able to be really responsive when an incident happens, for example. Things need to happen really quick. You know, every minute it takes longer to find out who introduced that thing and who to ask, you know, to pull on is another minute that your product is you know, down or causing issues. So for us, it's been very important for that incident response management and the process that follows that, the retrospectives, the linking everything together, the visibility for people in other departments. But it's also been very important for keeping us moving forward very quickly. And it's a very interesting phase for us because we went through traceability, as you know, back in the day when Mara and I used to talk a lot about that in sort of the build and release. And now we're exploring what does that mean for infrastructure as code and infrastructure that's being deployed and compliance. How do we keep away the toil of compliance from the developers to keep them moving quickly forward to support what our developers need to be deploying to those environments without slowing them down with, like, I have to, you know, write out a change management ticket. How do we create the automation that just happens and it's there and people don't have to think about it? So, you know, for us, the sort of the next phase of this is, what does that now mean for that infrastructure we're actually physically putting in that environment? How do we make that traceability of that infrastructure as well, along with what's getting deployed there? And that's sort of the next interesting phase for us.
That's cool. And I think one of the things to follow up with that, Slater, starting with you and then the others, since we're running out of time, I was going to ask, so if you could say what's been kind of challenging technically and then culturally, because I think those are two very different things
Yeah.
for especially big organizations. So I'd love for you to touch on it, and then, you know, everybody else too, since we're running on time. I just got some last sound bites for people, and maybe how to address those, like how you know, dealt with one or the other.
Just really quickly on a technical level, tools, we deal with a lot of monitoring and alerting, and anybody that runs operations knows that alerting is incredibly important. You don't want to get alerted for anything that's not actionable, but you also don't want to get alerted for anything that could be dealt with, you know, at 3 a.m. that could be dealt with at 9 a.m. the next morning. Tools don't have a lot of integrations, and you're using so many other tools. It's really nice to be able to just like, okay, this thing should create a ticket and this thing should create an alert. But a lot of the tools don't give you that choice. So having sort of another layer there, something like Gateway, has been incredibly useful for us. Culturally, you know, when you see teams go from a very quick agile environment that where you know, compliance schemes aren't a huge part of their day-to-day life, to move to more and more and more compliance, you know, cultural debt is a really important consideration. I think it was Eric that was talking about this, like, you know, keeping people happy but not piling bad process on top of them, you know, abstracting that away. You just keep doing your job, you know, as long as you keep doing that, the compliance part will just happen in the background.
All right, and then one more. Eric, do you want to try to take a stab at it? Because then we need to wrap up.
I have a one. If
go ahead.
you
Yeah.
don't mind.
Yeah.
It was really funny because when I started out about, you know, a while ago, I started out as a tester, and it was funny how, you know, a precise and timely information changed culture. Like when we started out, I would do some testing, you know, submit that information into, you know, outsourced developers Jira, and then we would have a separate spreadsheet where we would keep our things in and our statuses, and then we would go to a meeting like a few days later, and we would discuss with the outsourced developer, with consultants and a bunch of other people, you know, a whole room, and everyone would argue about what's the right status of things. Like, this bug is fixed. No, it's not fixed. It's just wrong in your spreadsheet there. And and once we got actually these two tools integrated, and actual, like, the exact status of the, you know, item in Jira as it is in JAMA, or whatever the tool you need, and in those meetings again, it was silent. Like, you just put up the dashboard and you see what's what, and the culture changed immediately. No one was arguing anymore. Everyone was just, you know, looked at that and started thinking, you know, how can we actually solve this? How can we figure this out? No one was doubting the information anymore. And that was pretty funny to see, actually, how that simple thing can change the culture.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. And I wish we had time, but we do need to wrap up and let people go. But we'll follow up with some materials and things that you can do. A couple things if you want to research more on these topics that we talked about. And then we'll also send out a recording of the panel within 24 hours. So I'd love to keep this conversation going. Maybe we'll set up another session just to keep it going. But I really appreciate everybody joining, and I really appreciate Slater, Eric, Carlos, and Carmen joining and sharing. I think it was wonderful to see everybody's sides and your experiences and everything. So thank you. And I guess thanks to everybody else too.